Welcome. If you're just joining us, we are glad that you're tuned in. CT has the day's proverb, and then we welcome our guest for the hour. Just to remind you that we will be running soon. So, CT, the proverb, we are still in Somalia.
Finally, this is a final proverb from Somalia. This particular proverb tickled me somewhat, and I felt I should actually simply present it.
Yeah.
A man prolonging his age sees a camel giving birth.
A man prolonging his age sees a camel giving birth.
Live long. See strange things. See unusual things.
Kuishi kwingi,
Yes,
kuona mengi.
precisely. And here, it's not just chronological, it's experience. If you're someone who immerses themselves into activities and things, you will experience things that others who don't never do. Some of which will be blasé, normal, but others will be unusual.
Industrialist Vimal Shah is the chairperson of the Mkenya Daima Initiative Steering Committee. He joins us now in the Situation Room. Welcome, Vimal.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Eric.
That's the hot seat of the Situation Room. How does it feel?
Good. It's pretty hot.
Comfortable? Familiarize yourself with the surroundings.
Thank you. Really nice. Spicy
The warming
too.
hasn't even started. And he's already claiming it's hot.
Trying to run ahead of us.
Yes.
Vimal, when you hear this proverb from Somalia, what's your interpretation of it? What we heard is CT's version.
Well, I think it probably, in my mind, seems like it's patience, right? Not being, hasty, and things will happen. It is not up to us to make it happen. It will happen. I think that's what I heard from the proverb.
Take time, observe, and you will see the camel giving birth.
We all evolve, right?
Right.
So evolution.
Right. Good perspective. Good perspective. So the Mkenya Daima initiative is one that is multi-sectoral. We have had conversations about Mkenya Daima before the election and what was expected of all of us as citizens who came together as Mkenya Daima initiative, the various interest groups from business community to civil society to religious sector to just ordinary citizens just coming together and saying, this is what we'd like to see our country doing. And this is not, it didn't begin this year. I mean, it began after the post-election violence of 2008, and then into 2012, we've solidified it. You've been pushing for something, which is peaceful elections, and then talking about post-election, how we should act as Kenyans. When we were having conversations before the elections, we said, you know what, this Mkenya Daima initiative, if we just talk about voting, and then we don't talk about what we do after voting, then we may have missed the mark. Which we were told, actually, that's the whole point, that we should not drop the ball after voting. Is that still the case?
I think that's still the case, Eric. Especially when we talk about inspiring peaceful elections. That's just one thing. But for what? I think the question is for what? For a prosperous economy, and I think for people to thrive in a situation where you've got enabling environment, you've got people with credibility who are running the show, and of course, every single person start activating things wherever they are. And we talked about three areas. One is the political, the social, and the economic pillar. And I think these are the three key pillars that we talk about at Mkenya Daima. And this time it was more about the political pillar, was more about influencing the choice of leaders at the ballot. And I think inspiring Kenyans to vote for good, accountable, transparent leadership, and therefore looking at the Chapter 6 of our Constitution of Kenya, making sure that we've got the professional experience there. Again, working with the electoral bodies, the management bodies who are managing the elections. A crucial part there was to say, alongside them, let's make sure that their institutions are strong enough to ensure that we get a credible election going out. So that was a political pillar. And then, of course, the social pillar was more to make sure that you influence a peaceful election and a smooth transition. Communicating positive gains, I think that was important. A lot of us forget to celebrate who we are, celebrate what we've got as Kenya. The freedom, this freedom itself here, SpiceFM, I'm just talking about this freedom to be able to express yourselves, express ourselves, and, say it as it is. I think that's so valuable. I mean, go out in other African countries and see where it's not available, and then you'll really value it. So that was one thing, I think, the social pillar. Also positively changing the the political, economic, and social narrative around elections, because every 5 years we have elections, and we all say every fourth year you sort of stop and say, hang on, we've got elections, so you stop for a year, and then you go on and say, after elections, let's see for a year, and we lose a period of 2-3 years in our cycle, and that's cyclical. And I think this was why Kenya Daima was born, to say, let's make sure at least there's smoothness in this, and the transitions happen quite well. The third thing was economic pillar. The economic pillar was to ensure that we actually influence the manifestos, and all the manifestos of course, them launching them. We had actually given all the inputs in terms of what we'd like to see, what Kenyans would like to see, and really driving and maintaining that people-centered, also economy-led transformation. I think this was adopted by most of the manifestos, so that quite helped in a way. And I think also pushing for seriously technology adoption everywhere now, in the progress of what we do now, in all spheres of Kenya. I think that was quite crucial. So the economic pillar was the third thing. So I think that was where we focused on, and these three pillars were quite crucial.
Looking at, how crucial they were and what the push was, how do you think then that things fared thereafter? I mean, there was the push, and we've seen us go through these processes that you speak of, the election, the transition, the voting, that asking Kenyans to make a decision based on a good leader, an intellectual leader, a focused leader, and then hoping that there would be a peaceful transition, and then again hoping that other things would happen. Do you see that this push resulted in the situation that you were after?
I think it did. I think if you look at the manifestos that were brought out by all the parties, you could see that very clearly that it was all issue-based on the manifestos. It was all key transformation of economy. It was about jobs. It was about creating more gainful employment for everyone. And I think that's quite crucial. But at the same time, I think this is where you influence the discussion. So you've got it said in the manifestos. So that's something that people have committed to, and they keep it up. The second thing, I think, is about the pillar on accountable leadership coming into power, and also a smooth transition. I think all that happened. Frankly, I would say, I would say hats off to all Kenyans all over for really maintaining the peace and doing it peacefully, even pre-elections. If you saw the way the campaigns were all sort of rolled out at the same time, when you saw the election period was quite peaceful. Thereafter, despite, I mean, let's face one thing, this was historic, right? We had 16,000 and something numbers, 16,098, I think, candidates standing for how many vacancies? 1882 vacancies.
Yeah.
So when you look at that, there was bound to be above 14,000 people who were not going to make it, right? Now, in that, you would have, that's 90%, right?
Yep.
90% of the people would be not disgruntled, but would not be happy with the results, to say, hey, I lost. And that's not a good thing for any candidate. But that happened. So that space was allowed. So I think that pre and post just elections, I think this has happened. The key question now is what you asked right now, is going forward. I think it's too early to tell right now. But what we see is very clearly it's playing out. People are now asking for accountability. They're asking for whatever you promised us. Can you start living up to it? And I think that's where the people who are now being brought into power, whether it's at MCA level or at governor level or women's rep or even at MP and senators and presidency, I think they're all striving to say, whatever I promised, I've got to live up to it, and let me go and deliver. And that's the work in process right now.
There's sometimes I have this debate with myself, and it's an ongoing debate, and I can never really conclude. the debate is about the moral and ethical standards that we set for our leaders. Is it that we expect too little so that whenever anything happens, which isn't untoward, we are quick to jump on it and say this is very good? Or are we so damaged that anything that even there's a whiff of goodness, we are likely to lean towards it and shout hallelujah from the rooftops and say this is a wonderful thing? Or are we just simply tired and we simply just want certain things to end so that we can get on with our lives? Because it's like one government after another. The thing that stands out, and this you've got it spot on, it isn't so much the leaders, it's the citizens. The citizens seem to hold a higher standard for themselves than the leaders do. The citizens expect certain things, and then the leaders drag us down. Every time you think we've gotten this thing right, and the citizens play their part, they go through the election peacefully, they do this, the leaders come in and they muddy the waters completely. Now, my debate. This is the question I keep asking myself. How long will this last? Because it seems to work when you don't have a serious crisis like the one we have now of drought. People can sort of like get on by and get along. But when there's a serious problem, then people start asking very serious questions and they start taking serious positions. I have never seen a situation like this one where a government is barely a month into office and people are already asking for accountability. And the voices are getting louder and louder and louder.
Are you seeing that as a bad thing or a good thing, City?
Oh, I'm seeing this as a very good thing. You see, my debate is, again, that was part 1A. Part 1B, what is it about the leadership structure of this country that when people get into leadership, they suddenly become disabled? They don't seem to hear well. They don't seem to feel well. They don't seem to have any moral standards. And that's what they were preaching throughout their campaign. It's something that really bothers me. It does. And it's with the political leadership structure. You see it every time. This government comes in, you have hope. Then it's like your hopes are just dashed. You just sit back. It's like, can we sit back and ask which hope is going to be dashed first? Because hopes get dashed.
What leads to that, though?
This is the thing that puzzles me because, I mean, there are many thoughts around it. Look at the primary contribution that we make. We pay taxes. You tax us a little more, we grumble a little bit, we pay. We grumble even more, you still tax us again, we still pay. So our bit is done. Now, when it comes to doing what you say you're going to do with what we've done, we have a continuous problem. That is what bothers me.
Let me give you a different perspective on that. I think when you look at it, right, would you agree with me that Kenya's democratic space has opened up a lot more? Do you agree with that?
Phenomenally.
Right. So that in itself lends to you the process of credibility in terms of the democratic process, number one. Number two, 16,000 people allowed to stand, and really, there's so many independents also, despite the party numbers. What was allowed, right? There wasn't any restriction there. That was quite crucial, right? Number three, I think the process, we may say a few flaws here and there, but hey, when you're running so many 42,000 polling stations and all that stuff, I mean, even in running an organization like this, you also have a few things. It's a nightmare, logistical nightmare. And also, I think the funding of it, that's another issue, right? And although we may all agree, and I think this is what I would say next time, let's not have these sort of elections. Let's have it on your mobile phone, right? So that you can just vote where you are, and that's it. And yes, it's credible, and it's checking you out so that you've got all the flaws sorted out. But using technology can be done. However, my point is, people are now able to speak their mind and say, I want to know, you promised me this, can you deliver, right? And you've seen it. You've seen it happening early. Why? Because I think there is the two sides of the coin, where there's one side who says we won, one side who says we lost. And in any case, whether we like it or not, one side was going to lose, the other side was going to win.
Yeah.
I mean, whichever way. So I think that's not an issue. But the point is that we took it peacefully. We took it through a process which went through the judicial process. This was a clarion call for Mkenya Daima itself to say, in case you have a dispute, in case you don't agree with the process or anything else, go to court. And this time, I can say openly, all the 4 presidential candidates, right, apart from many others, but all the 4 presidential candidates did sign the Mkenya Daima Leadership and Peace Pledge, right? They also signed on to the pledge from NCIC, which was talking about, political decency. I think this is quite crucial. These are public statements or commitments they have made to say, I will not take part in anything that is not proper. Number 2, if I have a dispute, I will go to court. And it went to court. Despite all the hues and cries and don't go to court, do this, do that, whatever it may be, it went through the process and that happened. Now that's happened. So I think this sets Kenya really apart in the whole of Africa. Number 1. Number 2, I think what's going to be happening now is we need to improve on public accountability, which means it's about all of us as Kenyans. And at Mkenya Daima, we talked about wajibu wangu. Our call was wajibu wangu, which means my responsibility, right? What does my responsibility mean? It means let's take responsibility for making sure things happen, right? In the past, we were all about haki yetu. Haki yetu means give me my rights. Give me my rights means you give me my rights.
Yeah.
And this time it's more about wajibu wangu, which means I take responsibility. I will elect the people I bring in. And I think that's important. When we said nitatenda wajibu wangu, it actually talked about a call to say, let's all take responsibility. Now, we've done that. The elections are over. Today, what is wajibu wangu? At that time, it was about kupiga kura, which means we told everyone, please go and vote. Do not go and say, it's okay if I don't vote because it's my single vote. Singularly, like if you don't vote, you're making a choice to say, I don't care, whoever comes in. I think that's important. So the whole issue around voter apathy, we need to get it removed to say, like, all the youth and everybody else who says, my vote doesn't count, it does count.
So, Vimal, do you think then you reserve the right to then be involved in any kind of participatory governance? Because that's what we're calling it now. It's, being accountable, saying, or rather holding leaders at whatever level accountable. If you do not vote, do you reserve the right to participate in governance? Because we're saying that it's changing from what you're saying. It cannot then be the modus operandi can no longer be leader will tell people this is how we will run. No. It is everybody together and saying, look, 1, we can accept, or 2, we cannot accept. Are you then saying that if you do not vote, you do not reserve the right to participate in this governance?
Well, you're opting out. In a way, you're opting out. And I think this is something that we need to rectify and correct. But that's morally, right? But legally, your rights are still there. As a citizen of Kenya, your rights are still there.
Yeah.
So I don't think we can stop that. But
Yes.
morally, you actually said, I really don't care whoever comes in. So that's what I'm saying. We need to encourage more and more of our people to say, please make a vote.
Sure.
Make it happen. And Kagua kabla ya kuchagua, what was that? That meant please check out who you are putting into place because they are going to be your leaders for the future. It's not about, sorry to say that, it's not about the notes that you get on a campaign trail where you say, now I've got loyalty here. It's about who can make things happen for us going forward. And I think that's all about credibility, transparency, and really the type of leader you want. Because it's the same thing in a family.
How would you see this playing out? I've got to ask that. So the vote is not going to happen for another 5 years. And we can basically put that aside. But there's a government in place for 5 years.
Yes.
What ought to happen, even as we talk about and use all these very nice buzzwords, participatory governance and, holding the government accountable, etc., holding your leaders accountable. What must be done? You see something going wrong, you speak about it.
Yes.
What? Are we saying going to the courts? What are we saying?
No,
Essentially
so
needs to happen.
So thanks a lot for that question. I think the important point here is, and it's a debate, right? I think the issue is around, as a citizen, whether I voted or not, I still have a right to public participation, right? I can participate at the MCA level. I can participate actively at my, MP level and talk to them and tell them this is not right. And I think this is something that we would advocate for as Mkenya Daima, ni wajibu wangu, which means every one of us, every one of you listening out there, take responsibility and say, I can question. And public participation is entrenched in our constitution everywhere else. We can do that, okay? We can improve every single thing that we've got. Let's not throw it to the politicians and say, Shauriao. It's not Shauriao, it's Shaurietu. Let's look at it. Our national anthem speaks about it, Niwajibuetu, right? And I think this is crucial to bring back to say, everything we do now, let's all participate. Whether you vote, I would put it this way, whether you voted or not, whether I voted or not, it doesn't matter anymore. The people who have come in have come in. Let's hold them accountable, right? They made promises, let them sort of bring it up. Yeah. But at the same time, can I help as a citizen to really make sure that whatever was promised can be done? Because whatever was promised was good for the economy, was good for the people. The only thing is in delivery, they may face hurdles. Like you said just now, that we face this hurdle and nothing happens afterwards. Let's see what's stopping them. Let's be participatory. Right now, if you see people are patient, waiting, something will happen someday. And I think the important thing is that we don't erupt later on and say, oh, it never happened. Let's all participate. And I think this is crucial. Let's also be impartial now about which side you are on or which side you are not on. I think the commitment to say, let's improve our economy, let's look at where we are going, and really, competencies. There are many competencies in Kenyans today. Right, a lot of them are inert. They're sitting in there, but they're latent, I'd call them. Right, we need to bring them out and really expose them and say, fine, here we are. And picking from all the learnings, we can have participation at every level. I would say to every citizen, participate at every level and be vocal about it, because you can hold everybody accountable.
I think we need to define participation. And to talk about, what constitutes participation? Is it attending a meeting and all? But let's continue that conversation after this break. It's 29 minutes after 8. Dr. Vimal Shah, industrialist, is a chairman of the Mkenya Daima Initiative Steering Committee. We are talking about the lessons on peace leadership, accountability after the elections. What is our role? Wajibu wangu ni upi baada ya uchaguzi? Time for a break. We'll be back shortly after this. Good morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Conversation continues with Dr. Vimal Shah, the chairperson of the Mkenya Daima Initiative Steering Committee. We're talking about the role of citizens after the elections. And Vimal was saying, so how do we define this participation? There are those that think participation is going for meetings that have been called by your leaders. So you go in there and you sit, you are there for 3-4 hours, engage. Or you write petitions and go to the houses of assembly or to court with written petitions. Or you go to a leader's office and you say, this is what's happening in my area. That's participation. How about on social media? How about speaking in public fora and just saying, we feel that this is not happening? Is that not participation?
I think there's two types of participation. One is just venting, or I'd call it vomiting it out and just putting it out there on social media and saying, I'm against this or that. I think active participation would mean let's define the issue and let's see what are the options available and what would like to look at. And I think even goes back to keeping people true to their promises. If you promise something, and I don't think anybody's got anything wrong against the manifestos that were put up or even the economic manifestos by county governments, by everybody else. They've also got visions. Today, I would say they're all looking for ideas. They're all looking for how do we make this happen, right? And that's a participation point where you can talk to your MCA and, your first point of call is your MCA. From MCA, you go to county governor. And that's where really all the work gets done today. Because of devolution now, let's realize that it's not the president that you go and speak to, because even the president has to then siphon it down back to the county governments. Let's talk to people who are relevant, number one. Number two, you can petition on any issue of concern that you have. You can petition, you can write a letter, and you can tell them, we want to engage on this one, right? And I think that's important. Civic education here is required to say, fine, you can engage. And I think the point right now is everybody's willing to engage. They're looking for ideas of how do I make it better. Second, I think when you look at, let's encourage everybody, whether you voted or not. Let's not have this thing about universal suffrage and, I didn't vote, so I've not got a right. You've got a right. You can actually talk about it. The people who've come in, they're coming. The participation on public at local level. Now, there's a lot of documents that come out in the press. If you see them, there's an advert for public participation on a road, on an issue, or something that's happening in your local areas. How many of us even look at that or even highlight that and say, let's go and participate here? When the budget is being made, there's a public participation invited. Everybody's invited to come and speak on budgets. Every county advertises to say, we are now looking at our budget, come and participate. I think a lot of people think it's not for me, it's for
There are people who
They will do all that.
Or there are people who feel, and I think it's worthy noting that there are those folks who feel that this public participation is a tick the box exercise. And the question really then is, how much of my views will really be put into the final decision that is made? For some situations in other countries, Vimal, we can't run away from it, that if they call for public participation, you can bet your bottom dollar that your participation will be included in that final decision. You know that if a road is being built and they called you to participate in whether it should be or which money should be used there, the accountability index is extremely high. So in as much as folks feel, all right, there are some people who should participate, there's also a number of folks who feel as though their input is not going to be included in the final decision. And we can't run away from that reality.
No, we can't. But I'll put it the other way around. Let's not start from a scarcity mechanism, scarcity mentality. Let's go to abundance mentality and say, yes, we will speak our mind. We will say it. And then if it doesn't happen, then we'll hold them accountable. But at the same time, I believe in one thing. If the student hasn't learned, the teacher hasn't taught. So if you haven't gone and put out your issues out there, don't assume that, oh yeah, nobody listens to me anyway. But that's something that's inside you. Let's remove that. I think there's a new government. There's a lot of new changes. Everybody's new. Let's go and make it happen. And then if it fails, you've then got activism, right? There's lots of activism that can be done. But I think for want of trying to say, because nobody listened to me in the past, I will have apathy, let me not even speak. I think that's something.
They say that history is the best teacher.
True, but history changes. Why don't you come in and write history? I'd invite Kenyans to say, we're writing history. I mean, this time, history was written for Kenya. It was a historical election, right? Against all odds, a party that was all, not going to win has won. Whatever's the point, things have changed, right? So I think this is something important. Everybody was fearful before the elections. Everybody was fearful that something's going to go wrong. We had all the media guys and everybody else saying, where's the trouble? Where's the trouble?
Right.
And on the same day, we were looking and saying there was no trouble, and they couldn't believe it. They still feel that there's going to be trouble. I think the issue around this is we're all skeptics. I'd like us to say, let's change that viewpoint and say, we can articulate. I think if you see the leadership now, they're actually asking, let us know, let us be patient, let's talk about it. Let's vent it out, let's bring it out. But my point is one more thing. When you go onto social media, as you said, Eric, go on social media and just vent out, things are bad, economy is bad. Let's put out the articulation of what is bad, what can be done about it. And the minute we articulate in that manner, where we provide solutions or options, I can tell you one of things. Out of 1 or 2 or 3 items that you put in, they'll be picked up, 1 or 2 will be picked up and they'll be taken in there, right? But at the same time, let's not stop from participating and giving in our views.
Let's not keep quiet. I think my view is, as long as people are venting, that is also participation.
Yes.
Because I feel, because there are people who will come out and say, there's a road that's being built in my neighborhood and I don't like this road and I was not consulted and my neighbors are also complaining about this. That raises the issue. Now, there will be others who will take it up and forward it to the relevant authorities, to the relevant leaders. Leaders also ought to be able to pick this. This is the voice of the people. They don't have to write to you in a signed petition. You guys just read and see, okay, people are complaining about a certain road. Let me take action about a certain from that. We've seen the DPP taking action from tweets saying, all right, I have seen a certain conversation taking place on social media, and I am directing the Inspector General of Police to institute investigations of this. I think that is also participation.
I agree with you.
Important.
I agree with you fully. I think, Eric, that's very important. It's called diagnosis and prognosis. So in order to get diagnosis, to say there's pain here, vent it out. Nothing wrong with that, right? And then, of course, there are others who can participate and say, here's a prognosis of what can be done about this. And I think that's a lot of intellectual dialogue that happens on social media. Yeah. Why not encourage that? I think there's nothing wrong with that. However, I think if you see the but the people now, the leaders at every level, right, are now sensitive to what's being said on social media, and they pick it up. Right? I'm not talking about the malicious beating below the belt stuff, but really, if you bring it out in an articulate manner, people will take it up.
You wanted to say something, I interrupted you.
No, you didn't actually interrupt me. You ignited a certain thought process. And I'm thinking, everything we're saying sounds really nice. Huh? And it's nice because we actually see it happening. It is true. We are engaging with our political process. We are engaging with the democracy. But it doesn't get to the heart of the matter in my mind, because the primary preoccupation with political leaders and those who end up in government is not to provide services for the people. Not really. Many do. It appears that the reason why people get into these positions is to see how quickly they can get rich. Now, the unfortunate thing is that wealth that they seem to apportion to themselves is what is intended to bring about these changes that we're talking about. We experimented with technocrats. The previous government experimented with technocrats. If I needed proof of the concept that it is not a technocratic, it is not a political issue, it's a human Kenyan thing, it was that. Now we have people in authority who are predominantly politicians. Now, I do not hold politicians in very high regard. Not because as people they are bad, but what they do and the tasks before them and the responsibility they have, they often abrogate it. So much as I may want to think well of them, they don't give me much of a choice. There isn't really very much I can look at.
Historical experience?
No, it's just simple experience, because how do we talk about the billions of shillings, for instance, that we give to the counties, and yet the conversation about what these billions are used for is never, at best, it's opaque, at best. What you hear with clarity is it's not enough. So you say, okay, got that, but the one you got, what did you do with it? So that we can understand what it has done, so that when you say it's not enough, we know what else is needed. And yet, this vetting, for me, this one didn't even just put the icing on the cake. It baked another cake altogether. In fact, several cakes. Hey, everyone who was being vetted is a multimillionaire. And I'm thinking, wait, what don't I understand here? Perhaps when I grew
You
up.
now understood why you're not on the list.
My friend, with those figures, I will never be on the list. Ever. Even you give me a second lifetime, I won't be. What am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that everything we're saying is true, but we have a long way to go. Doesn't mean we shouldn't continue. I'm saying let's have a different perspective, even when it comes to holding leaders to account. Let us be a little more practical. This issue of them being in power for 5 years, yes, the term is 5 years. It doesn't mean we're going to let you sit there for another 5 years, doing what we didn't want you to do. Our constitution allows us to have a different conversation about if you don't shape up, you, my friend, you may need to look for another job. That, in my mind, when we're talking about accountability, we said this when we're talking about committees that are vetting. I was of the view that before you even vet, there needs to be a document already prepared. And the countries are told, see this document. If you don't fulfill what you have said, we are going to initiate this process. And you, my friend, will be out. You are not going to promise and think we're going to sit back and just abide by the nonsense you're going to bring.
So some form of a social contract.
Written down, and we tell you, here we are, we've already documented, we've got it in place. Vimal, what do you think?
I think it's important. What you say is very, very important. But let me just say one more thing, right? Let's remind ourselves, let's remind all Kenyans and politicians and people coming into government that politics is not about just feeding myself. It's not about me getting rich. And I think the important point here is it's about equitable service delivery to the people. If we can drive this home to say, coming into politics or coming into coming into leadership at any level, whether it's CS or whatever level, PS, it's equitable service to the people. If that's not being done, there's no point, number one. Number two, it's not, and I say it again, it's not an opportunity to enrich ourselves. And also I'd like to highlight that it's not about because of my ethnic bias or because of my tribe, my people, and they come in. I think it's about national cohesion and development. This is crucial to hold people to tell them very clearly, this is what we must do, first of all. Secondly, it's not about me first. It's not about me first mentality. I think it's about putting Kenya first. If I put Kenya first and then me second, right? And I think the important thing is the service delivery. That's going to be different. Because if we talk about this, we're all looking at Kenya's prosperity, right? If Kenya prospers, we all prosper together. If there is peace, we all prosper together. However, 2010 is when our new constitution came in. That's the time when we started doing this. It's 12 years now, right? It's a journey, right? When you look at development happening and where we've got CSs coming in who are now not politicians or rather not in parliament. Let's put it the other way around. There could be politicians per se, but they're not
in parliament.
They're not supposed to be in parliament.
Not sitting MPs.
Exactly. They're not sitting MPs. Therefore, they are an executive running directly under the president.
Yep.
So you can hold them fully accountable to whatever they do, and you can hold the president accountable to whatever their actions are. I think that's a key factor that's changed. So the executive is independent. Your parliament is independent. I think the whole National Assembly and the parliament. And then, of course, you've got the judiciary being independent. I think that's important. Number two, I think the key issue here is being able to say as it is. As it is. Rather than say, let's go for sycophancy. And I think this is important to say that a lot of times, we all talk about being sycophant to this person or that person. I can't tell them the truth because, if she's got a problem, I can't tell her because I have to tell her the right things.
Right.
No, I think let's go and say it as it is.
Being blunt.
Being blunt, but not abrasive, and not being malicious about hitting below the belt. I think that's what really touches people. Yeah. If you give constructive criticism and tell them this is what it could be, this is what it should be, right? I can tell you one thing: whether it's your road, whether it's your place, whether it's the environment, whether it's corruption. Otherwise, this whole issue of corruption. Last 10 years, we talked about it, and there were many pronouncements made. We shall end corruption. Nothing happened to it, right? Which is why we've got the apathy, right? A lot of people are apathetic that nothing's going to change.
Yeah.
But Vimal, how do we rub out something that we encourage and something that we've institutionalized? I mean, it didn't happen. It's not as though it was transported to us from some other planet. This is homegrown.
Yes, so that is systemic. There is something that is systemic, something that is there in the sense of inspector coming and stopping you and saying, I need money for this, right? Let's call that speed money, right?
Yep.
In order to sort it out.
Yep.
Fight it. I would say fight it. It's got to be fought through associations, through coming together. Alone I'm weak, together we are strong. And in fact, we come together on this and say, fine, we're not going to give this. We've got an Anti-Bribery Act now. We've got that whole thing there. Let's make sure we enact it, right? But apart from enacting it and really living through it, let's stop giving away where you don't want to give.
No, you don't want to do.
Yeah.
But Vimal, let me just throw the cat among the pigeons. So, for example, the Mkenya Daima initiative is led mostly by the business sector. We have very many engagements between the business sector and the government. When you talk about corruption happens with government officials being facilitated and enabled by the private sector. So the private sector is very much to blame, just as much as those people who are individuals in public service. We don't hear the private sector coming out strongly to say we are speaking out against some of our members on issues of corruption. We don't hear the private sector coming out to say we do not want, these are our basic operating rules with anybody who is doing business with government. You don't have anything like that. You've never signed up anything. You've made politicians sign documents, but you yourself have not signed anything to say this is how we shall conduct business with government, to make sure that you start fighting corruption at that level. When several of you came together and said, you know what, just so that we can create that openness in government, the late Bob Collymore and others said, this is how much I earn, this is my wealth, this is what I do. Not everybody took it up. So the private sector really is the one that is squarely holding this baby.
Well, I think everybody who's not in government is private sector, right? So you can talk about civil society, you can talk about people in religious, they're all private sector. So I think all together.
So we are private sector.
Yes, you are private sector. You're absolutely private sector. If you're not in government, you're private sector.
Private.
Number
Okay.
one. Number two, it's about wajibu wangu now. And I think this is where we hold everybody responsible to say, let us all make sure we have a code of ethics. Very clear code of ethics. And there will always be, and there always have been, people who actually go and give speed money, go and give to corruption and give to whatever inducements. You've seen the entrepreneurs, right? In Kenya.
Yep.
And this is all collaboration, collusion with government officers, right?
Yep.
Trying to make that transparent is a big thing right now, and that's what should be done. So I think that's one more thing. Second thing is, when you're doing business with government, let's make it transparent. Let's make the processes such that there is less human intervention there, where this human discretion is reduced, right? And there are possibilities to do that. However, obviously, the people will have to speak about this. The people will have to speak about it and say, fine, if they see something happening, let's make sure we report it.
You've mentioned something good, a code of ethics. So
Yes.
should we expect something like a code of ethics coming from the Mkenya Daima initiative
It's already there. Have a look. I
on
mean,
how to deal with government, how to do business with government?
yes, go and look at the code of ethics. It's online. Even if my company, we've got a code of ethics online, you can download them. There's lots
What does
happening.
it say?
It clearly says you don't give bribes. You don't pay money on the side. You don't give inducements. You don't even take inducements. Not about give, but you don't even take inducements.
Yes.
It's there. That code of ethics we must all live by. And I think there's a whole, team of people who have actually signed up to it. Even the UN Global Compact, people have signed up to it. Now we just make sure we live up to it. It's not always that it's in the law and it's already in the law. It's only about making sure it is now enacted. Again, we say wajibu wangu, right? If every one of us made sure we don't give, and if every one of us said we don't do this, right? We stand up to it and we fight for rights. Now, sometimes the processes that have been made in such a manner that you are induced to say, in order to speed this up, I have to give something here. That's your tender issues, right?
Yeah.
We need to rectify that. I think that's important. That's where your collusion is. Now, if we don't root it out, let me tell you one thing. It's not about this government. For the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, you will have that creeping on. And then what are you going to leave for your children here? The key issue is not about today and me and you. It's about what do we leave for our children. I think this is where the credibility needs to come in. And I think the whole discussion has happened. It's a journey. We're not going to get rid of it in one day.
Yeah.
But the systemic problems that are there, where the system actually says unless you give, you don't get a job.
Yeah.
Unless you induce, you don't get this. I think we've got to go on a different tangent there. So again, is it going to happen tonight? That midnight tonight, everything changes? No. Is it a journey? Yes. Can we help it? Yes, we can. In fact, I would put it to all three of you. I think you three can really change the narrative towards that, right? Towards wajibu wangu. And you say, fine, it's your responsibility, it's our responsibility. Singularly, I vote, but together we make a difference. And I think that really can help make a big difference. And we hold people accountable. If something is going wrong, rather than say, let's make it sensational. Sorry to say this.
Yeah.
A lot of the media want a story and they want to make it sensational so that they sell the media. I'd rather say, let's stick with the facts and get the facts clear. Because a lot of fake news these days comes out on, just trying to pull down Eric or trying to pull down somebody and say, let's put them down. I think that's not required. What we require is factual, fact check, and really bring the truth out.
The business community is not to blame, really. There's a way in which business is conducted. It's legal, it's above board. You want to meet people, you have a cocktail party. You want to sell a product, you give freebies. It's business. You're told this is a sample of what we have.
You advertise on Standard.
Yep.
Yes, we do. I'm saying there's a way in which business is done.
Okay.
It's not necessarily inducement. When you conduct research, you compensate your participants, or you remunerate them for their time and also for the transport. There are ways in which monies, goods and services are expended to ensure that there's some smooth running and consideration is there. This isn't really the subject of the discussion here. What you're calling is systemic. The normalizing through leadership, because normalization is not what Eric and I and you do. No. It's those in leadership. Those people look at. Now, if the things we are saying are seen to be normal at that level, the harm that is done is irreparable. Because it now becomes, if it is, because the way we are constructed as human beings, we actually look up to leadership. And if leadership leads in a particular way, then it becomes the norm. So even when we talk about it, and the leadership is what seems to be fighting against it, well, we have our work cut out for us. It doesn't mean we don't fight, but it simply means that the need to be realistic about how we are going to fight it needs to be perhaps given a little tweak, because this thing is not just in the system, it's in our bone marrow. It is serious. You can hardly do any business with government without huge chunks of money being required of you. It is next to impossible. When people talk about the system being compromised, they don't know half the story. Now, how do we get us to move to the point where people understand this is what I'm supposed to do? Let me do it, and let life move on. How do you get to that point?
I think that's a very valid point, and I think I agree with you fully that we need to rectify that. In order to rectify that, let's do a diagnosis. What's the diagnosis of the problem? The root cause is where people start saying, oh, I've got a tender here, and this is my ministry coming out with tender, so give it to one of my friends and say, have a look at it, right? Change the norms in that and then make it different so that the specifications are so different that they go out and, there's only singular person who can supply that product, and therefore it becomes different. So I think that's one thing. Collusion around that, make it transparent. Can we make it more and more transparent? Can we use technology so that it's advertised, people all see it, and then there is a system? It can be done. Is it being done elsewhere? It's being done elsewhere. Why not here? So it goes back to trust, right? Today, what's happening is the level of trust is very, very low in what people say as politicians and what we listen to. Because we listen or we hear things the way we are, not the way it's being said. We have a lot of mistrust amongst ourselves. And I think this is important to say, fine, if you said this, so get people to say, commit to this. If they've committed to certain things, let's hold them to that. And say, fine, if you've committed to this, make sure we're going to hold you to responsible to that. And if you hold them responsible to that there will be no such thing happening. And if things go wrong, then you've got to hold them accountable to say, sorry, you said this, you did something different. So integrity, leave it, it's okay. Integrity, right? Intent, competency, and results. If any of these is zero, the trust is becoming zero.
Yeah.
So integrity, which means what you say and what you do should be congruent. Intent, the way you do it and what your intentions really are. Is it to defraud or is it to really help development? If that's happening, let me tell you one thing. Give them the credit for it if they did a good job.
Yep.
If somebody did a good job, give them the credit. Third thing is competency. Do they have the competencies? And that's where the vetting and what is going on to see competencies. And then results. You could have the best of integrity, best of intent, good competency, but no results, right? Then again, you erode the trust. So I think this is where we need to have all four, and it'll have a level.
Aligned.
We will keep improving on this all the time. It happens in private sector, it happens in companies, it happens in families. Let's improve that so that we start taking this. The last thing I want to say is, wajibu wangu. This is our responsibility as citizens of Kenya to say, let's hold people accountable to what they say, right?
Very well said, Vimal. Dr. Vimal Shah, the chairperson of the Mkenya Daima Initiative Steering Committee, has been here with us. Come again and let's keep holding all of us accountable for everything that we do.
Spice.
Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.